Okay, so I want to welcome everybody tonight to another version for the 2020, actually 2021 now, but our virtual Missouri Livestock Symposium. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening and remind you that as we continue to post content, have speakers, go to MissouriLivestock.com for all of our updated information. Tonight, we have a special guest with us this evening. Mr. Ken McNabb is joining us. Ken, the true blue American cowboy, as he is very well known, or also known as the modern day Roy Rogers, right? So Ken is an expert horseman. He's done clinics all around the world. He's done many colt starting competitions. Ken comes to us tonight in his home in Wyoming, and we have had the joy of having Ken with us in Kirksville, Missouri several times in the past to be a speaker, and certainly glad Ken is with us this evening for our Q&A discussion. And Ken, as long as you can hear me and everybody can hear me, welcome to our virtual Missouri Livestock Symposium tonight.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'd rather be there, but I'm glad to be a part of it anyways.
I understand. Would love to have you here as well. And so we have ahead of time, we've collected several questions for our Q&A discussion tonight. And I've kind of broken those questions up into various categories. And so I'll be your host for this evening, and we'll kind of go through those questions and have a good Q&A discussion with Ken. I will say that as we go along with our discussion, if you have questions you'd like to ask as we talk along, please use the chat function. We will be monitoring that. And so if you've got something that comes up as we're talking along, please put that in there and we'll try to get to it as best as possible. We do have a lot of questions tonight. So Ken, I'm just gonna quit wasting time talking and dive right in and so we can get to the heart of it. And so one of the first things I'd like to talk to you about tonight, Ken, is your very successful Diamond McNabb horse sale. And so we had several questions come in about that. And so one of the first questions I'd like to ask you is, and I know in talking to you in the past, you buy a lot of horses for this sale, right? And so you buy them in various stages and ages. And if you wouldn't mind, walk us through what you look for when you're looking to purchase horses to train for your horse sale.
Well, I always tell people the first three things that are important when you're buying a horse is disposition, disposition, disposition. And I can't overstress that enough. We all like a pretty horse. We all like a horse that's conformationally correct. We want one that's sound. But honestly, what we need first of all is one that's trainable and gentle and quiet-minded. And those things, I think sometimes we accidentally look over them when we walk in and see this amazing, beautiful picture. Sometimes we get awed by the picture and we forget to look at the things that are really, really most important. So when someone tells me they have a horse for me to look at, that's the first questions I'm going to ask. I'm going to outright ask, is there any chance this horse will ever hump its back up? Will he ever threaten to buck? Will he spook? Will he do anything that's going to cause me a problem down the road? And the reason I avoid that, I've ridden lots of horses that needed a little correction and a little bit of fixing, and they become really great horses. But when I'm purchasing for our sale, I have to purchase something that is absolutely rock solid, dependable for the customer. Even though we're going to put a year on it and we're going to ride this horse all over Wyoming and we're going to know him, I don't want there to be something underlying there that comes back 6 months after they've owned him. So I look for that. I look for that really gentle, quiet horse. The next thing I look at, this has really changed for us in the last 10 or 12 years. I don't look for a very big horse. 14, 3 to 15 hands and, 1,075 to 1,200 pounds is absolutely the biggest I want. And that's because honestly, the industry has changed, and people don't want great big horses anymore. They know a 14, 3 to 15 hand horse is capable of carrying quite a load and still being an athlete, and he's not as hard to get on. So we don't look, we've got my son, my oldest son is not quite, but almost 6'3". He's 240 pounds. It takes a lot of horse. And so we always have some big horses for him to ride. But reality is those are the harder horses for us to move. So we look for gentle, we look for size, and then we start looking for color. And the last thing, and this is the hardest one for me because I'm a nut about this, but the last thing I look for is breeding. I love good bloodlines. I love good cow horses. We worked cattle all day today, and I rode a phenomenal horse that'll be in this year's sale. That's just a super cow horse, and it's so much fun. And you don't get that kind of action out of a horse that's not bred to be that. But reality is the industry is not looking for Ferraris. They are looking, the people out there wanting to ride safely, whether it's ranch, show, or trail, they're looking for a horse that is dependable. So bloodlines are sort of the last thing on their list. So I go through that set. Now I'm also going to look at structure. I want a horse that's straight-legged. I want a horse that has no hint of hidden unsoundnesses or visual unsoundnesses. I want a horse that's clean all the way through. But those things that are outside of his structure are the most important things I'm looking for.
Okay. So what would you say, what kind of an average age by the time you get them, or are they mostly started horses that you're dealing with?
So we raise a few of our own that we take through the sale. We buy a few young horses, but mostly we're looking for that 6 to 9 year old age range when we're purchasing. Excuse me. And we're wanting to purchase horses with a solid start to them and a lot of good use behind them. So we're not buying a lot of colts. We're buying a lot of horses that somebody else started. We have 2 or 3 guys that travel the country looking for horses for me. They know what I'm looking for. They know what I want. And when they find it, they bring it to me. And what I really want, what I ideally strive for, is a horse that I know his background story. So they can tell me, here's where this horse came from. Here's how long they owned him. Here's what they did with him. Those things are important to me. They're really not. Let me rephrase that. They're really not important to me. I'm one of those people who I take everything at face value. But to my customers, they want to know, where was he before you got him? So that's why it becomes important to me. For me, I take it at face value. I work this horse, and he's honest with me, and I'm honest with him, and that's what's important to me. I don't worry about what happened last year. That's not something I'm going to worry about. But sometimes it is something that people look for. So we try to find that horse where we have a great background story on him and we know it and can tell it.
Very good. So what are those things that you look for a horse to do to say, okay, this horse is ready for sale? Or what are the things that a horse might show you to say, nah, we're either not going to sell this horse, or this horse may just not be ready for the type of sale that we have?
So here's what we do. I'm going to tell on myself a little bit, and I'll hopefully not run into this backwards one of these days. But my favorite customer is this fictional lady, and her name is Aunt Martha. And I don't know that I've ever met Aunt Martha, but I've met a million Aunt Marthas. And Aunt Martha could actually be my mom, right? She is that person that is 35 to 70, and she's looking for a really nice, safe individual. That's what she's looking for in a horse. So when we're putting this program together, what we do is we say, is this horse ready? I ask my boys, is this horse ready for grandma? My dad is 76. He still is going 1,000 miles an hour, so I can't use him as an example. But I asked him, is this a horse you would be worried about putting grandpa on? And we don't have any of those because that's just grandpa. But that's what we look for. So we don't worry about anything else. We have all the training we want to get done, but we have to get that done in order to use this horse here on the ranch. So before we're ready to sell him, I want to know, can my nephew who's 6, can he ride him? Can my mother ride him? Can my dad ride him? Who in the family can't ride this horse? My wife, Dee Dee, is a very accomplished rider, but she likes gentle horses. She does not ever want to feel the impact of the ground again. And so I'll ask the kids, or I'll ask the people that work for me, the interns and whatnot, can Dee Dee ride this horse? The answers to those questions have to be yes. Now, occasionally we sell a horse that the answer is no. And we tell people, like I sold a horse last year, a Palomino horse. I rode him all year. And Skip never did a thing wrong. He was phenomenal. I roped hundreds of calves on him out in the pasture and at brandings. I worked colts on him. He was a phenomenal horse. But he was a Ferrari, not a Volkswagen Bug, right? So we just have to call that. We just have to tell people, he's not going to buck, he's not going to spook, he's not going to bolt. But if you kick him, he is going to go, right? So we answer those questions first. Is he ready for this group of people? The next question I ask all of my riders, and I ask them this all year long, and then I ask them this the week of our sale. And I'll tell them, all right, this horse is going to sell on Saturday, and he's going to sell for a lot of money. I want you to imagine walking into the grocery store next Wednesday and bumping into the person that bought him. Are you going to smile and shake their hand, or are you going to duck around the aisle and hope they didn't see you? Because if you're going to duck and run, I don't want him in my sale. I don't want that horse going down the road from our sale. So those are questions we ask. That's how we know the horse is ready, when we're confident in who that individual is. When, I have a great friend who started our friendship by buying a horse in our very first sale. And I had never met Trish before, but she bought a horse from us in our very first sale. And she returned the horse by the 30-day guarantee. And I asked her why. And she said, well, my vet looked at him and he's not convinced this horse is going to stay sound in the kind of rough terrain that we ride in. And I said, okay. But I said, just so you know, we've ridden in way, way rougher terrain than you've ever ridden in. And she said, no, that's not possible. She said, that's not possible. So she returned the horse and she picked out another one as per the guarantee. If we can do that, we do. Otherwise, they get a credit in the next year's sale. But we gave her a selection of horses and she picked one out and I took her for a trail ride. And she tells everybody I intentionally took her on the trail ride from hell. And I really didn't choose to go any place terribly much worse than we would. I just took her where we go to gather cows. And at the end of the day, she said to me, you're right. We never ride like this. I try to put our horses through things. I had a young man coming to intern with me. And so we were interviewing and I took him for a ride. And he was one of those young men that never stopped to listen. Jake just talked 1,000 miles an hour. And I couldn't get him to get quiet. So I just kept going into rougher and rougher and rougher country until finally Jake got quiet. And he was quiet for a few minutes. And then he looked up and he said, you really like to test these horses, don't you? My goal is to put these horses through things that they will probably never see again. So that when a customer calls and says, hey, we're having this issue, I can look at them and say, or I can talk to them through the phone and say, well, here's the experiences we had. Here's what really happened. We want every horse to be soft in the mouth. We want every horse to rate back his speed. We want every horse to have a great stop. We want every horse to turn over his hindquarters and side pass and move off your legs and lope off on the correct lead. In reality, most people are never going to do a lot of those things. They're going to get out and go ride across the country. So we have to balance that. Some of the time in the arena, making a horse with a handle, and then naturally we ranch in really big, rough country, so it works out good for us.
Very good. So kind of you kind of mentioned something about your intern. So for those out there that might be interested in working with you, either as an intern or a potential trainer, what's kind of your program for getting involved with the Diamond McNabb horse sale?
Well, traditionally, we have kept interns, and an internship. Excuse me. I lost my voice about 3 days before Christmas, and I'm still coughing a little bit. But anyways, traditionally, an internship is a 1-year program where they sign up to be here. It is an unpaid position. Housing is provided, but they're responsible for their lodging, they're responsible for their meals, and they work 5.5 days a week, really hard. And then what we do is we give them every 6 months, they're eligible to ride through one of my 3-week certification programs with no training charge. The programs are actually held at the Powderhorn Ranch, and so they are responsible for paying their lodging. But as far as the rest of it goes, they don't owe me anything. They've earned that, and that sort of mimics the way I grew up. I was apprenticed to a rancher near us when I was 14, and I worked from him from the time I was 14 to 18, and I didn't get paid a dime, but I learned a ton. And so I just sort of, I tell kids when they say, well, I can't work for free, I tell them, then you don't want it that bad. And here's the thing, if you go to college, depending on where you go, you're going to spend a lot of money. Here, you're going to spend sweat equity. And if you're not willing to put the sweat equity in, I don't really necessarily want to spend that much time teaching you. Now, there's always our apprentice program for people who want to sort of fast track that. They can just pay to go through the apprentice program. But that's sort of how our program works. And we ask that nobody quits in the first 90 days. After 90 days, we sit down and we talk. And in years of doing this, I've only ever had 2 interns leave at that 90-day mark. The only other thing I tell them is if you're going to leave before the 1st of March, because if you want a recommendation from me, if you leave between the 1st of March and the first Saturday in June, which is the busiest time of our lives, you will never get a recommendation from me. So if you want to leave February 25th, and I won't hold it against you. But from that point on, it's everybody full time.
Very good, very good. So we'll kind of move on a little bit in our Q&A discussion, and maybe get to a few more pointed questions about, or maybe just specific questions. So one question that came in was your philosophy on bit transition. So I've heard your talk on bits and bitting before. The question kind of centered around the use of snaffles, curb bits, hackamores possibly, and kind of what is your philosophy on transitioning through those or starting horses in them and so on?
Well, for me, to make it simple, I think a snaffle is the only bit that you ever actually need. It just may not be the only one you actually want. So I think that I probably do 85% of my teaching to a horse in a snaffle. When I'm teaching my horse something new, I want it to be in a snaffle. And an O-ring, D-ring, egg butt, full cheek, don't really care what the cheek piece to that snaffle is, but I want a direct pull bit. The reason for that is it's simple. You pick up on one rein, he feels pressure in the corner of his mouth. He doesn't feel it in his pole. He doesn't feel it in the chin strap or the curb area. He just feels it in one corner of his mouth. You pick up on 2 reins and he feels it across his tongue and in both corners of his mouth. But it's very, very simple. So I don't try to transition my horse out of that snaffle until he's doing everything I ask in the snaffle. So then along comes the question, well, wait a minute. If he's doing everything you ask in the snaffle, why take him out of the snaffle? Well, breed associations, different show associations require that we take a horse to a bit. If you use the bit correctly, the horse is graduating. If you use the bit as a leverage device to cause pain to control your horse, the horse isn't graduating, he's going backwards. But what I look at is we're going to use a pound as an easy number to figure, okay? So if I take a snaffle bit and I'm using a pound of pressure in my horse's mouth, when I pick up on the rein, he feels 1 pound in his mouth, there's 1 pound in my hand. There's no leverage conversion. When I pick up on the rein on a 2-to-1 leverage bit, if I put a pound in my hand, he feels 2 pounds in his mouth, 2 pounds in his curb, and 2 pounds in the pole where the headstall goes. All right. So why would I double the pressure? I wouldn't. When I switch to a leverage bit, I lighten my hands. The whole concept behind switching to a leverage bit is to take my horse closer to finished, to create more balance and a prettier look in my horse. So in a snaffle, I'm riding two-handed and my arms are moving and my wrists are moving and there's a lot of movement going on. When I move to a leverage bit, I should be one-handed eventually, moving my fingers, not moving my wrist. Now, in the training stage, we're definitely going to have some two-handed riding and a broken mouthpiece shank bit. We're definitely going to have some more movement. But my goal is to go from the snaffle to a very quiet one-handed ride. So I use a series of bits to do that. I go from the snaffle to what I call the lifter bit, which I run normally without a chin strap, and it adds pole pressure. That's all it does. It's just like a snaffle. The bit is exactly 50-50. The purchase above the mouthpiece and the shank below the mouthpiece are exactly the same length. It's cut in half like a teeter-totter. The mouthpiece is the fulcrum of the teeter-totter. That adds no leverage, but it does add the pressure to his pole, getting the horse used to lowering his head off the pole pressure. When I've got him riding really good in that, I'll use a light chin strap on it, a loose chin strap, and then I'll move on to a 2-to-1 bit. A 2-to-1 bit is any bit where you measure the purchase from the mouthpiece to the headstall, divide that into the shank from the mouthpiece to the rein. The purchase should fit into the shank twice. That's a 2-to-1 leverage conversion. So we were at 1-to-1, we doubled it 2-to-1. I need to lighten my hands. I rarely ever leave a 2-to-1. I change the mouthpiece. I start with a 3-piece mouthpiece. I like a O-ring in the middle. And then I go to a 2-piece mouthpiece. And eventually when my horses are very finished, I go to a solid mouthpiece. So for me, it should always be about making my horse's mouth more comfortable, making him quiet, and never allowing him to lose confidence in what we're doing. So I told you earlier before the meeting started, and I think I mentioned it on the meeting here, we worked cattle all day today, and my son is on a 6-year-old horse that is really a nice broke horse, but he's not a super cow horse. And so Kurt had him in a 3-piece mouthpiece today, really setting the horse up, really working the horse quiet, and never scaring him. And so when he was done, I told him, I said, wow, that was really fun to watch. You really brought that horse along nice. What was nice about it, that horse never got panicked. He never thought he had to rush to get the job done. That's what creates head tossing, gaping, scared horses, and hot-natured horses. If you teach the horse how to get the job done without panic, then he'll be quiet and polite. And that's my goal in all the work I'm doing with the bridle. Keep it quiet, keep it polite, until when we're all said and done, we really don't need the bridle. My goal is to ride my horses bridleless with a bridle on them. So my hands are holding the rein, but the communication is coming through my whole body. Can you get me a water?
My I think we kind of covered the questions on the bits, and so kind of moving on in that sort of tack question, we had a question come in from hopefully somebody listening tonight about the use of a standing or running martingale, and if you think they're useful, or what are any positives or drawbacks. What are your thoughts in that sort of a subject?
Well, I think all tools, all tack have their place in their location. I do own a running martingale. I could not tell you where it's hanging in the tack room right now. I probably use it once every 3 or 4 years, maybe. My opinion of martingales is your hand should do the job the martingale is going to do. Every now and then you get a horse who just really wants to elevate his head, and you don't have enough time to keep training him to keep his head down. What do I mean by that? How much time would it take to get this horse to carry his head low? So maybe he's going to take 5 or 10 times as much time as the average horse would take to teach him to carry his head at a low elevation. That's when I'll use a martingale. But I find a martingale to be a dangerous tool if you're not experienced with them. And let me tell you why. I've seen a lot of horses flip over backwards with a martingale on them. People get into the horse too tight. The horse has no place to go. He can't get his head up, and he panics and he comes over backwards. Or worse yet, he gets in rough ground and he slips and he comes over backwards. So I avoid them for the most part. And I believe that it is the job of your hands to keep that horse low-headed and quiet. Does that mean that I think they're all bad? No, I have a very dear friend out in Washington State that is 85 years old and still training cutting horses. And he is a great hand. And I ride his horses and love them. And he uses martingales all the time. So I'm not opposed to them. Just for me, they're not what I want to use very often. I want to focus on my hands being better and teaching that horse and communicating through my hands, seat, and legs to create a willing horse. I guess the way to sum it up is, if you're not paying attention, with a martingale, you can make it happen. With your hands, you have to let it happen.
Very good. So as I said, have several questions to get through this evening. And so kind of the next group of questions, if you will, is coming what I would just be considered kind of training type questions. So one of our listeners had submitted what I would consider to be a two-part question. And so the first one is gaining ground respect. So you've probably seen this a lot, pushy horses on the ground. Walk us through a little bit how you might teach a horse, if you will, to have better ground respect.
Okay, so one of the things that I do, like at expos and whatnot, when we've got a live performance, I'll take that pushy horse on the ground, and I don't do any groundwork lesson because I want the audience to see the philosophy that I'm trying to teach. So I'm going to tell you what I do. I walk into the arena, I've mic'd up, and I start talking, and this person is standing over here with their horse, and it is stepping on their toes, and it is pushing them around, and it is screaming, and it is pawing, and I leave them alone. I let them be tortured long enough that everybody in there is feeling bad for them. And then I walk over and I take the lead rope from them. Respect on the ground with a horse is actually all leadership. And it's a matter of your attitude. I take the lead rope and I walk off. And I walk fast naturally. If you were here on the ranch, I walk fast everywhere I go. So I walk off. And when the horse starts to catch up, I do a 180 and go the other way. And I do a 90-degree turn and I go the other way. And I change directions about every 5 to 10 seconds. And this is all I do. And I'll do this for about a minute while I'm talking. And when I'm done doing that, when I stop, the horse will stop and stand and stare at me. And he will stand in place. And I can take the lead rope and put it over his neck and walk off, and he will follow me. Why? I didn't do any groundwork lesson. I established leadership by moving his feet. That is so critical. I want people to understand it. The groundwork lessons are really important, but you can do all the groundwork lessons in the world. And if you don't have the right attitude, they won't help you. I don't care whose method you're watching. If you just do the lesson, but you don't actually change how you present yourself to the horse, nothing's going to change, right? So when I do groundwork, I want people to realize it's about leadership. Horses are that herd instinct animal, herd environment animal. They're social, they stay safe in a group. They're that animal that will gladly run through a barbed wire fence and cut off all four legs to avoid being attacked by a piece of toilet paper. How come, if that's true, they don't run themselves to death in the wild? Because they have a herd leader who tells them when and where to run. Why is that relevant? Because that has to be you. You have to be that highest on the pecking order. And you don't get that by carrying a 2x4 and beating the horse upside the head. You get that by moving his feet. So when we start into the groundwork lessons, the most basic, simple lesson we do is a lunging lesson. And I want my horse to move around me quietly and politely. So I'll always just take my left hand and point where I want the horse to go, take the tail of my lead rope or a stick, spin it towards his shoulder, and step towards him until he moves off. And if he doesn't move off, spank his shoulder until it moves. How far did I ask him to go? One step is enough. If he moves one step away from me, I release the pressure. Horses don't learn from pressure. How hard I hit him in the shoulder is not relevant. They learn from the release of pressure. So as soon as he steps away, I drop everything. I'm thankfully moved, but I'm not begging him to move. I'm telling him to move. I point again, show him where I want him to go, spin that rope once or twice, spank that shoulder. Shortly, when I point where I want him to go, he starts moving and getting over there because he understands there's going to be a consequence for lack of movement. In the herd, the dominant horse pins his ears. That's pointing and showing him where he wants to go. If that horse doesn't move, he's going to get bit. Right away, he's going to get bit. And if biting doesn't work, he's going to get kicked. It's going to happen. So when I'm talking to people about pushy horses, I want you to change your approach to that horse. Don't walk in aggressive and mad and being a bully. Walk in as a leader and be willing to take responsibility for what your horse is doing and realize you need to change the leadership. Right now, he's taking you for a walk. You're not taking him for a walk. He's the herd leader. Well, he's scared of everything. He might spook and jump on top of you, right? So I've got to change the way my horse is looking at me. He has to start seeing me as a leader. Any groundwork you do, you have to do it with that in mind.
Very good. So kind of, I'll skip around here a little bit, but this is a question that kind of maybe follows that question a little bit, and it kind of addresses horses letting down. So, what are some of those physical cues that you look for in a horse when you're training them to say, you know, this horse is stressed, this horse is relaxed? We can move on in the training process if I see this.
Okay.
What might be some of those physical cues you're looking for in a horse that tells you to either back up or move forward?
Okay, so looking for stress is a little bit harder than looking for relaxed. When I see a horse and his eyes are bugging out, you know, his head is up, his eyes are tight, His muscles are tight. He looks scared. He's not lying. He is scared. He is nervous. He's stressed. You need to back off the pressure a little bit and find a way to make that easier for him. If that horse is locked his front feet on the ground, we're back on groundwork for a minute. That horse is locked his front feet and he's spinning his hind end around his front end, and his front end's not moving, and he's facing you with his hind end only. That's a really big sign that this horse does not trust you. I want to see that front end relax and come out of the dirt and walk towards me. If I'm seeing those signs where this horse is really nervous, everything I'm doing is he's jumping and twitching, I need to change my program, or I need to not necessarily change my program. I need to do more of it sometimes until the horse relaxes. One of the things I try to tell people, follow your gut. You know how many people tell me this line right here? I got hurt really bad and I knew it was going to happen because, wait a minute, stop. You knew it was going to happen. Why did you get hurt? Because you ignored your gut. Your gut told you, don't get on this horse. And you went, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay. When I'm working a horse, and I've done the exact same thing, I've gotten hurt. I can tell you, I have, in a lifetime of working horses, I have been hurt several times, and I can't think of one time that it wasn't my own doing. My right shoulder's a mess because I got dumped off a horse 3 years ago because I forgot to take my spurs off on a young colt on his second ride outside. And it was his fifth ride total. And he spooked, jumped sideways, hit my spur, jumped the other way, hit my spur, and the wreck was on. My fault completely. So when you are working that horse and your gut says, man, I think he's nervous, he is. He is nervous. I don't care if you're on the ground or on his back. If you're going, something's not right, fix it. Fix it right now. That's the next mistake people make. I'm just going to survive this. I'm just going to get through this. No. If your horse is making mistakes or your horse is nervous, let's fix it right now. Let's do what it takes. How do we fix it? Move his feet until he relaxes. I don't care if you have to get off and get back on the ground. Move his feet until he relaxes. How do I know when he's relaxed? I look for boredom. I love boredom in my horses. When I'm doing something and my horse acts like, oh my goodness, this is boring, that's fantastic. You know why? You've been scared stiff and you've been bored stiff, but you've never been scared bored. Those two emotions don't go together. You can't be scared and bored. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so when I see that horse acting kind of bored, fantastic. He's got the point. He knows what we're doing. When I'm teaching him something new, I look for the sweat to dry, right? So let's say I'm asking my horse to stop and back up. And so we work at it and work at it and work at it. And finally he stops really nice and backs up. And he's covered in sweat. And so people will tell me, I quit right there because he got it good. He doesn't know what he got good. That was the first time. It was an accident. But you quit. And so those people will come back and they'll be like, oh my word, every day is like a new day with this horse. I just have to start over every day. He never holds on to anything. Well, he doesn't hold on to anything because we didn't do it long enough for it to become muscle memory. Why do we train our law enforcement officers? Why do we train our medics? Why do we train our military, our firemen? Because in stress, they need to have muscle memory so they don't have to think about it. Our horses are the same way. We need to practice it until it becomes muscle memory. So when that sweat starts drying and the horse is still performing, now he knows the lesson you taught him. So I love to see the sweat dry. I love to see my horse get bored. Those are easy visual signs that I know, hey, we're getting somewhere here. This is a good spot to quit. The hard part is it's so much fun then that you don't want to quit. Because now we're actually clicking. Now we're getting along and it's so much fun. But that's when you need to start saying, okay, here's where I'm going to quit. And I tell people at my clinics all the time, I'm the worst for saying one more time. Just one more. But I say that because the horse isn't quite where I want him yet. And he's not quite as relaxed as I need him to be. And you're going to mess that up. I've messed that up a million times. I still every now and then go, oh man, I should have quit 5 minutes ago. If I would have quit 5 minutes ago, this horse would have been in a better spot than he's in now. So you're going to mess it up, but watch for those signs. If you see him sweating, you see his head up, he's breathing hard, his muscles are tense, and we're not ready to quit. He looks bored, the sweat's dry, the breathing is relaxed. We're ready to move on.
Very good. So kind of moving on in our Q&A, we had a question come in about somebody'd like to talk to you a little bit about training or working with horses that are soft-skinned or they're more sensitive. They found that a pretty interesting topic and looking for your thoughts on horses that might be a little more on the sensitive skin side.
This is one of those conversations where I'll get myself in trouble if I'm not careful. There's definitely a difference between border collies and hound dogs, right? I grew up with big game hounds and coon hounds. We have several different breeds of cow dog now, and my son has big game hounds. There's a clear difference, but they're both dogs. They're both dogs. They eat the same, right? But that border collie is 1,000 times more sensitive and smarter than that hound. Now, the hound does his job in an amazing way. Horses are much the same. There are horses out there that are so quiet and gentle. We used to have this old Cremello horse we called Rocky. I told everybody Rocky was born broke. Rocky never did anything wrong in his whole life. He never did anything right either, but he never did anything wrong. He was fantastic. I loved him. We kept him till he passed away. But Rocky was not sensitive. Those sensitive horses take less. So my brother is a canine officer and trainer. And so we were talking cow dogs the other day, and he told me, he said, you know what? I have to work with blue heelers. I can't work with a border collie because I'm too abrasive and the border collies can't take me. That's the way some people find it with those really sensitive bred horses. And we're seeing these sensitive horses, you know, you start looking at some of your reining horses and a lot of your cow horses, your cutting bloodlines, rein cow horses. These horses are so feely. Their skin is, it just crawls. And they've got so many nerve endings because they're bred that way. They're bred at a much higher level of performance. And so if you're not careful, you've been working with a hound dog and you walk in using hound dog pressure on the border collie, you're going to get in trouble. Good horsemanship says use border collie pressure on everything. And then if you need to increase to the hound dog, you can. But sometimes we don't think that through and we go backwards. We've been working hound dogs, we get a border collie. Okay, so we've been working these, pick on them. There's plenty of sensitive draft horses, but draft horses are by nature cold-blooded. We've been working these draft horses or draft crosses. Now all of a sudden we're looking at an own son of highbrow cat. And so if you use the draft horse pressure on the own son of highbrow cat, you're likely going to get in trouble. So if you start off with the draft horse using highbrow cat pressure, you'll be fine. If the draft horse doesn't respond, increase the pressure a little bit. Start out as light as you can, and then you will get along with these sensitive, feely horses and increase the pressure incrementally, realizing the release is the most important part you're looking for. So focus on looking for a reason and a way to release your horse. If you will look for a reason and a way to release your horse, you will never apply too much pressure because when he tries it, you'll notice it.
Good thoughts on that. So another one of our questions came in, and you'll like this. One of our listeners had moved from a warmer area to a colder area. And so we were just talking about, yeah, me too. We were just talking about the weather here in Northeast Missouri before I let everybody in, and I said we've had snow and ice for 10 days to 2 weeks now. And but the question is centered around and living in a cold environment. What do you do, or what are your thoughts on, let's just say, horses with long rest time? So weather's not fit for riding, and you know, what would you recommend? And I think the question was more like giving horses long extended periods of time off and then having to go back and retrain them, right? So what are your thoughts or some suggestions you might give to those people that live in an environment where riding a horse every day or even a couple times a week may not be possible sometimes?
So your horse has a great memory. In fact, your horse has the second best memory of all land roving animals. He's second only to an elephant. He has a phenomenal memory, and he'll remember 98% of what you taught him years from now, the good and the bad. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that he won't have objections to leaving vacation time and going back to work. Okay. So I always try to put myself in my horse's shoes a little bit. And so our company, what we do, we take off from the 23rd of December to the 2nd of January. Every year, all we do is chores during that time. We're here, we play, we go skiing, but we do chores. Nobody wants to get up and go to work on the 3rd. Nobody wants to go back to work on the 3rd of January or the 2nd, whatever day we choose, but that's the way your horse can often be. So with the kids, I've learned, don't wake them up at 5 a.m. and give them a shovel and tell them to dig post holes in frozen ground, because all you're going to do is make them mad on their first day back to work. They're just going to hate you all day long. So instead, ease back into it. That's the same thing. When you gave your horse 3 months off for snowstorms in the winter, when you come back to him in the spring, he didn't forget anything. He just doesn't want to go back to work. So start out easy. Do your groundwork. Build your relationship back up from the ground. Spend a few minutes. Do you have to do groundwork for 4 days? No. Do groundwork for 5 minutes. Just remind him of who you are in the relationship, that you're the leader, and then his muscles aren't what they were. So don't jump on and go loping down the trail for 15 minutes. Get on and walk a ways, trot a ways, build him up. I like when I'm conditioning a horse, I like to see just the dent in their neck get sweaty. When you see that divot in their neck start to get sweaty, that's a good time to quit. You've worked him enough. Now, that doesn't mean you have to put him away. If you're out on a trail ride, just back off a little bit. Back off and let him rest and relax, and just don't turn him into a full body sweat. That's where we end up with sore horses, lame horses, and we end up with a lot of horses who are belligerent and angry and mad because they just feel like they can't win. So when you bring that horse back, do a few minutes of groundwork the first day, remind him where we're at, ride him light the first couple of days. When I was a kid, my dad turned the horses out the day or the Monday after Thanksgiving weekend. Horses got turned out on winter pasture, and they got brought back in the Monday after Easter. That was his rule. They lived on winter pasture. Shoes got pulled. They just got to go be horses for that time frame. When they came back, Dad insisted that all of us kids had to ride bareback for a week to 2 weeks every year, so that we got our sea legs back and the horses kind of got worked back in without anybody having a big blow up. Well, I don't do that, but it wasn't a bad idea. So what I do is just take it easy, spend a few minutes on groundwork. Don't just tear into this horse. Don't jump on. think respectfully and think of yourself like a house guest when you're on that horse. There's times I ask a lot out of my horses. There's times when I would never be that kind of a house guest. But when you first come back after a long time off, give him a little time to work into it.
Good thoughts. Another question that we had come in ahead of time. What would you say are some good exercises for teaching canter leads, or maybe just even leads in general? And also talks about side pass, pivoting, which so maybe your thoughts could break that down for us a little bit.
Sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work backwards from the lead. I'm going to say the lead is our target. Okay. So before I can go to asking my horse to lope on the correct lead, I need to be able to control his body. So I break his body into three basic compartments, really four: his head and neck, which we control early on with the bridle. Then we move to his shoulder. We have his ribs. We have his hips. That's the three compartments we're working on. Okay, so with his shoulders, I'm going to use my leg in position 1, which is about a half an inch to an inch behind the front cinch. And I'm going to add pressure, say, with my left leg, with his nose turned to the left, and I'm going to move his shoulders to the right. And then I'm going to reverse that. So I'm going to work on that until I can take his shoulders 10 or 15 steps away from his nose. So he's looking left, traveling right. And then I'm going to reverse it and do the same thing on the other side. Now I have created control over position 1, and I can move his shoulders left or right. I'm going to move back to his rib cage. I use position 2. So that's really my legs straight down and my toes turned out so that my heel is coming into contact with the horse. And so when I'm working the horse's shoulders, if we take his withers and say that they're pointed straight at 12 o'clock, when I was moving his shoulders, he was bending his nose to 11 and walking with his shoulder to 1, okay? Or he was bending his nose to 1 and moving with his shoulder to 11. When I go back to position 2, I'm going to ask him to step all the way over to position to 9 o'clock and 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Okay. I'm going to get this horse to where he moves more laterally sideways. When I go to position 3, my foot's going to move back to the back cinch. And if you're riding English, basically under the cantle of your saddle. And I'm going to tip his nose a little bit, and I'm going to put my inside leg. So if I tip his nose to the left, I'm going to put my left leg underneath the cantle of the saddle or back by the back cinch, and I'm going to hold it there until his hindquarters step away. His front end should stay relatively still, not rock solid still, but relatively. I don't want him walking forward, and his hind end should step around. I'm going to work on that both directions. I need to be able to control positions 1, 2, and 3 on both sides of my horse before I ask for the correct lead. And I need to be able to do that at a walk and a trot before I ask him to lope off on the correct lead. If I don't have those basic elements of control, then I'm going to be asking too much, and I may get what I asked for, but it will be an accident. I can't guarantee that I'm going to get it. And I don't mind gambling. I just don't like gambling with my horse. I want to know I'm going to get what I'm asking, right? I'll think I can outrun you. Maybe I can. I'll risk that gamble, but I'm not going to risk gambling with my horse. So what I'm going to do is have those 3 positions on each side really well polished and under control. Then when I ask my horse to lope off on the correct lead, this is where I differ from some people. For this conversation, I'm going to put the rail on our right, and we're going to lope to the left, okay? If we're going the other way, you just reverse everything. So when I ask this horse to lope off, what I'm going to do, I'm going to tip his nose to the left, the direction we're going. I'm going to put my left leg sort of between positions 1 and 2, and I'm going to push his rib cage over towards the rail. Get it out of the way. for the horse to take the correct lead, the inside hind leg has to step outside of the ribs. And it has to go forward and hit the ground and then push off. So I take his ribs and his shoulders and I move them over. And I say, get out of the way. Then I take my right leg against the arena rail, back to position 3, push his hip more to the left, squeeze with both legs into the lope. Okay. What I did is I set the horse up so he looked like a banana. I kept his nose to the inside, looking where we're going. I moved his shoulders and his ribs out of the way, left his hip to the inside. So when I squeeze with both legs, that hip naturally goes forward, past the rib cage, and pushes off. When we talk about the canter, people ask me all the time, what's the difference between a canter and a lope? And I tell them the Mississippi River, right? If you're east of the Mississippi River and you ride an English saddle, you probably canter. If you're west of the Mississippi or anywhere on a Western saddle, you probably lope. Okay, so, but the word canter really fits what we're talking about. Because if you watch a horse lope at you, his body is not straight, it's canted. That horse's hind end has to be to the inside because that hind leg has to pass the front leg. It has to pass the rib cage and pass the front leg without interference. So you've set him up like that. You've built that banana and set that horse up by using positions 1 and 2 to move his ribs and shoulders over, and position 3 on the opposite side to push his hips back. That's a hard one to tell you and not show you with a horse, but hopefully that helps answer your question a little bit.
All about finding the right buttons and
right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So another question that came in early kind of deals with moving a horse on a spur, and they're laying their ears back. They're giving you some of those physical cues. So what's that telling you if if you put the spur to a horse in one move or another and it's laying its ears back, and how would you address that moving forward?
So when I was a kid, my mom had this policy. She would discipline us, and then she would tell us, I know you're mad at me, and I want you to know it's okay for you to be mad at me, and you can say anything you want to me, but I better not hear it. That's sort of how I look at that. When I work with my horse, it's okay if he's mad at me, but he better not tell me about it. When he starts pinning his ears, he's telling me about it. He's finding courage in himself to challenge my leadership. So one person will come along and say, no, you added too much pressure. Okay, you need to back off the pressure. Okay, what we end up with is giving the horse the leadership, because now he tells us when we can and can't. So for me, I refuse to be taken hostage. One of my favorite examples at a clinic, and it's not as relevant now as it was 4 years ago, but I used to tell people all the time, I think we should just pay ISIS. I think if we just paid ISIS, I'd say it over the microphone, I think if we just paid ISIS, they would leave us alone. And you'd see people want to leave. They'd get so mad, they'd want to leave. And I'd say, no, think about it. If we just pay them, and I would kind of keep it up until I knew I was right at the edge, and then I would ask people, why won't paying them work? And they'll say, because they just want more. That's how a terrorist works. So I would say then, so you can't negotiate with a terrorist. Right, you can't negotiate with a terrorist. That's exactly right. You cannot negotiate with a terrorist. It's not possible. When your horse starts acting like a terrorist, you can't negotiate with him. Everybody thinks we shouldn't negotiate with terrorists, but let's negotiate with our horse when he acts like one. No, when he pins his ears and tells me I'm mad, I'm sick of this, I'm going to leave my leg there and continue asking until the pinned ears go away. And as soon as the pinned ears go away and the attitude changes, then I'm going to say, okay, all right. So then along comes the person who goes, wait, I mean, if I do that, my horse will back me off. Okay, you have two choices. Let somebody else ride your horse or risk it. Because you can't negotiate with a terrorist. It's not possible, right? So when my kids were little, they did push-ups in the aisle of the grocery store. If you're going to embarrass me in the grocery store, you're going to do push-ups in the grocery store. You can't negotiate with a terrorist. My kids did not have to do that more than once or twice. They get the point. That's the same with your horse, right? In years and years and years of teaching clinics, I have only very, very rarely seen it go the other way, where you really needed to back off. The horse was just really trying super hard, and that person was adding too much pressure, and the horse couldn't win. And that is a possibility. You aren't looking for the win for the horse, and so pretty soon the horse can't win and he blows up. Most of the time, it's the other way around. Most of the time, the horse is telling us, nah, put it in your ear. I'm not doing that. When your horse starts acting that way, you've got to say, no, my leg is staying here. The spur is not going to move until you yield your hindquarters or yield your shoulder, whatever it is, and your ears come forward. Change the attitude.
Know when to release the pressure.
Look for that. Look for the reason to release it, always.
So for everybody listening, I've got about 3 questions left. I think we'll go ahead and kind of push through and try to cover these 3 questions that got submitted. And one of them was in our online chat. And so kind of an interesting one, actually, and one I see quite a bit. And so somebody wanted to know if you consider a horse too old to work with. So maybe another way to say that, the age of the horse, and you can take a lot of variations to this, but they haven't been touched and they're 10 years old. Is my 20-year-old stallion too old to train to ride? I don't, you can take a lot of ways with that, but what's kind of your feeling there a little bit on whether you think a horse is too old to move forward with?
If you're showing me a 15-year-old BLM stud horse that just got ran in, I'm going to tell you, you've got a big job ahead of you. And it's going to take a lot of time, because he's been responsible for the safety of the entire herd. He's fought hundreds of battles and won. He's learned how unbelievably strong and athletic and talented he is, and he's learned he's in charge. So that horse is going to be very, very hard to change. Not impossible, just difficult. It's going to take, in most cases, more time. Beyond that, no, I don't think old horses are any more difficult to work with than young horses. I used to say there's only 2 kinds of horses that spook: young and genuinely scared, and old and they've learned how, right? So as our horse ages, how he looks at things change. He's been doing it this way a long time. It worked. He's always got a release. So if he's been getting a release for 10 years the same way, you have to overcome that habit. So that may take longer than the exact same horse would have at 3 years old to overcome that habit. But he will learn the same way. He will respond to pressure the same way. So I've had lots of horses brought to me over the years that were aged, 12, 15 years old when we started them to saddle the very first time. And in my opinion, they learn the same way. You just have to be aware they've got a few habits. My dad was 28 when he got married. I suspect that was harder on my mom than it was had she married him when he was 21. Would have been a little hard on her. She'd have been 14. We'd have been in trouble. But regardless, you get set in your ways. So certainly there is an amount of, we need to overcome habit. But as far as, is it more dangerous? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's any more dangerous. That 15-year-old wild horse he might be a little bit more dangerous because he has fought so many battles. So don't get in a fight with him. Don't start a war. You would never walk into the boxing ring and tell a world champion heavyweight boxer, hey, you're dumb and ugly. That's not a smart thing to do. But we walk into the round pen with a horse and get pushy. He's 40 times stronger than that world champion heavyweight boxer. So we really shouldn't get any pushier with the 3-year-old than we do the 15-year-old. But we can get away with it with the 3-year-old because he hasn't got the experience to know how strong and how powerful he is. So I think when you're working older horses, you need to keep that in mind. You need to understand you're overcoming habit, but don't think it's, the old saying, oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I don't find that to be true at all. I really don't. I think you can teach an old dog anything you want to. You just have to break it down and make sure he understands it.
So maybe another way to ask the question as it pertains to you, you said you raised a few horses. Do you prefer to start them at 2 or 3, or do you kind of let the horse's maturity tell you that a little bit, or what?
Sometimes I let my schedule determine it. We've got some 4-year-olds right now that have not been ridden a whole lot. I love to start a horse at 2. I've got a 2-year-old stud colt here right now that's a grandson of my horse, Stormy. Belongs to a friend of mine out in Washington, and we don't really take outside horses in, but I raised this horse's mother, and I just fell in love with him. And so I took him. He is 20 months right now, and I'm not riding him, but I am doing tons of groundwork. We're saddling him. I'm ground driving him with a halter and long lines. But I keep my lessons short. I keep my lessons really short, 15, 20 minutes. I think that you should look at a 2-year-old or any baby, any young horse, the way you do a kindergartner. Kindergarten was fun. I mean, you showed up in the morning for show and tell, and then you had, you did your alphabet a little bit, and then you had snack time, and then you worked on coloring, and then you had nap time. And, it's just barely a step up from preschool. That's the way starting the 2-year-old should be. Keep it short, keep it simple, keep it fun. And don't pound on them. Some of our colts, we don't start till they're 3-year-olds, just for whatever reason. Sometimes they need to mature physically. Sometimes they need to mature mentally. But I like to start my horses at a 2 or 3-year-old age. I think how much do I ride them? Well, this blue colt is, we're going to ride him. We're working him every day. Lots of my 2-year-olds, we're working them 10 times a year. Our 3-year-olds, maybe 20 times. Maybe by the end of their 3-year-old year, they've got a total of 30 days of training on them. And they've got a lot of groundwork, over that time, catching, deworming, vaccinating, handling. That's not part of the training. But our 4-year-olds, we kind of camp on them and ride them. That's like a teenager. That's how fast that happens. I look at that yearling 2-year-old years, weanling to 2 years old. I'm talking kindergarten. 3 years old, I'm looking at somewhere between 3rd and 5th grade. 4 years old, I'm looking at a 15 to 16-year-old kid, and you better put him to work and make him sweat for a while. So at that 4-year-old year, we're ready to start riding them pretty hard. And the foundation is there. They're gentle, they're quiet, the hard work is done. Now all it is put them to work. And still don't destroy them. They're changing teeth their 4-year-old year. It's not easy. They're growing up. You don't take a 16-year-old kid and ask him to keep up with a 25-year-old man. You don't do that. But you can put a 16-year-old kid up to a lot. And that's the way I look at those 4-year-olds. We started out the sale talking about our horse sale, or started out the conversation talking about our horse sale. And we start our 2-year-olds and sell them started. And a few years ago, one of the students showed me video footage of dragging some calves on a 2-year-old, and they were really excited about it. And Brandon and I said, I'm sorry, but I don't even want to put that video out there. I don't want people to see it because that's not something I would ever do. I would never drag a calf to a branding fire on a 2-year-old. That's like asking a kindergartner to take a college entrance exam. It's too much. I wouldn't do it on a 3-year-old. That's my personal opinion. Other people don't feel that way. That's the way I feel about it. I think that colt's growing. He's spotty, stressed, dragging calves around all day is too much. And she told me, well, I only drug 10. That's a lot. That's a lot for a little horse. So, that's the way I look at it. I just see them growing up, and they grow up super fast. So when we hit that 4-year-old year, we're ready to go. And their 5-year-old year, they are like a 25-year-old guy, and they can take it all. The more you give to them, and if you've brought them along that way and built them slowly that way, then they're gonna show that, and it's gonna work for you.
Good thoughts. So got two of the last questions we've got, and then we'll kind of wrap it up for the evening. But through these and kind of what I would call fixing problems. All right. So one of our listeners submitted a question. They have a 17-year-old halflinger. They've had a little over a year, so I would consider that a short amount of time myself. But he started bucking, bought the horse for a young person, their granddaughter. He bucks when he's mad, scared, or sometimes for no reason at all. You see this a lot with horses, in not necessarily halflingers, but just any horse. Sometimes comes out of a horse sale, and the question kind of becomes, does he need to find a new zip code, or do we need to find a new way to train this horse, or what's kind of your opinion on that sort of a question?
That's a hard question because it's a double-edged sword. You said, does he need to find a new zip code? Any point in time, and sometimes I get myself in trouble here because people don't expect this from me, what I'm about to say. Any point in time when your horse becomes unenjoyable, something has to change. So you either have to figure out how to change the program, or you need to let him go somewhere where that's not the case, where they can get along with him. Because horses are dangerous. So when I look at a 17-year-old horse, part of me says, okay, is he really bucking? Or is he kind of crow hopping and scaring people who are a little bit less experienced? Well, it doesn't really matter, because it's just as frightening to that person if he's crow hopping and they think he's bucking as if he's really actually bucking. What it sounds to me like is you have a horse who has discovered he's the leader in the relationship. He's discovered he's in charge. And what he wants out of life is a giant release. And the way to get it is to crow hop around and buck. So what I'm going to do with this horse, I'm going to put myself in their shoes. I'm going to assume we're a lot less experienced riders. So if he starts to act up, if you have to get back on the ground and do groundwork until he is soaking wet in sweat and paying attention to you, do it. Get back on the ground and work him. And then if you get on him and you ride him for 30 seconds and he acts ignorant, get off and do it again. That said, I'm going to briefly tell this story. I was in central Missouri at a trail ride event, and it was my second or third year at the event, and I had met a family, and there was an 18-year-old girl who had become a very good friend of our family, and I was standing watching her ride this horse, and another trainer was standing there, and he said, Ken, one of us should tell her to get rid of that horse before it really hurts her. And I said, you know what, Mark, you're right. And I walked over and I said, Sarah, you need to get rid of this horse. I said, I'm sure you love him and I hate to hurt your feelings. She said, no, actually, I don't love him. I don't like him at all, but I don't know what to do with him. And I said, Sarah, it doesn't matter what you do, just get rid of him. 3 weeks later, that horse killed that young lady. I have never forgotten that. I wish I would have bought him that day. So I very rarely tell that story, but when you're talking about this situation, you bought this horse a year ago, things aren't going the way they should. Yes, you can fix him, but if it's truly dangerous, get out of the situation. There's another horse out there that you'll enjoy. There's another horse out there that will make you smile, that won't treat you that way, that won't learn to take advantage of you. How much will he cost? I don't know. I know my youngest son was 2.5 years old, and we were looking for a horse for my older son to step up to. And so we were down in Arizona, and Kurt would have been about 6, and he was really packed a rope with him everywhere he went, and we wanted a rope horse. And this lady had this beautiful Sabino paint horse that was really gorgeous. She'd showed him at the Paint Worlds. And so my wife told me, go buy that horse. He's perfect. And so I went over and I asked the lady if he was for sale. And she said, yes, he is. And she wanted 25,000. I didn't have 25,000. I didn't have close to 25,000. I could have maybe swung it if she'd have said 2,500. But at 25,000, no way. I wasn't getting that. So I walked away, and Dee Dee said, did you get him? I said, no, not even close. And this gentleman standing there said, well, I know where there's a really great horse, and they only want 1,200 for him. I said, okay, well, let's go look at him. So we drove across town to look at probably the ugliest horse I have ever owned. This horse is white. We call him Silver. Some of you have seen him on television. He's cremello at best, maybe close to not even cremello. He's so white, he hurt your eyes in the sunlight, but he was broke to death. And so shortly after we bought him for $1,200, the boys were riding him, and Dee Dee said to me, are you worried about him running away? And I said, no. She said, why not? I said, because I can catch him on foot if he does. He's the most unathletic horse in the world. So that was 15 years ago, and that horse is in town now. I loaned him to a family with 2 little girls, and they take him to the 4-H fairs, and they show him, and they have him on loan until I have grandchildren. Was he pretty? No. Did he compare to the $25,000 horse that had been to the Paint Horse Worlds? No. My kids were safe. That's what I want. So in this situation, is this 17-year-old horse fixable? Sure. Should he get a new zip code? If it's dangerous, yes. Get rid of him. It's not worth a broken arm. A broken arm changes a child's outlook on horses forever. I see horses with kids dramatically different. I want only the safest horse with kids on them, because I want these kids to love riding and ride the rest of their lives.
Reminds me of a saying somebody told me one time about the cost of a horse, and they said hospital bills are pretty expensive too. I've never forgot that. As my kids have grown older, I certainly can relate to, you want a safe one.
Yes, you do.
Start out. Not just for the physical, but the mental aspect of it. So last question that kind of comes up on this fixing the problems, somebody that has what they call a mouthy horse. So he's about 10 years old. He's very active in his mouth, sounds like he nips a lot. They tried rubbing his muzzle, pinching his lip. He still does it. Have to watch him the way he doesn't nip the farrier, or when you walk by him, he wants to, sounds like maybe strike at you or nip at you. So what are you thinking about something like that a horse that likes to nip?
Okay, so a couple things, because you added another sentence in there. When you walk by, he likes to strike at you. So that sentence changes the picture a little bit, because it's not just nipping. But let's talk about just nipping for a moment. Nipping is the one thing I have zero tolerance for. Zero. Because there's no excuse. If he kicks me, I can say, oh, I spooked him. He didn't know I was there. I startled him. He jumped. He slipped. He hit me. Wasn't on purpose. I can make excuses all day long, and I will. But when he puts his teeth on me, he knows exactly what he's doing. There's no accidents. It's done on purpose. So I deal with it very assertively. When my horse puts his lips on me, I'm going to act like I'm trying to kill him for 3 seconds. I will not touch his eyes, but I will whack him in the end of the muzzle with whatever is in my hand. I will go after him for 3 seconds. 3 seconds past the last aggressive behavior. And once I've done that, I quit. but I'm going to be incredibly consistent with it. Every single time he does it. My horses are, I love my horses. I love to rub on them. I don't mind if they rub their head against my shoulder gently. They can't knock me over. I love my horses. I love to be with them. None of my horses will put their mouth on you. That will not happen because it is just too dangerous. Years and years ago, I had a gentleman in a clinic up in Canada who had, as a 7-year-old boy, been attacked by a stud horse and had his whole face bit up. Biting is dangerous. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to attack that nose. I'm going to get after him for 3 seconds, leave it alone, act like it didn't happen. Every single time he does it. And somebody's going to say, well, aren't you worried about making him head shy? Not at all, because he knows what's going to happen. He expects it. It's natural to him. If he bites another horse, they're either going to squeal and run or they're going to fight back. So it's natural to him. Now, the horse also strikes. So this is a horse that I would probably put in the round pen. Oh, there you are. This is a horse that I would probably put in the round pen. And then I would work him in the round pen, but I would not do inside turns like we normally do. This is a horse I would do outside turns with until I can make him stop and put his nose on the rail anywhere I want it, so he knows I can move him away from me. I would do outside turns until I can absolutely dominate where he's going. That's a word we don't use in the equine industry anymore, dominate. Sometimes we need to use it. This is a horse who needs to understand that it is not acceptable to bite and strike. Biting and striking are very dangerous. Kicking is bad. Biting and striking is lethal. It's just too dangerous to tolerate. So put him in the round pen, get him moving around, and start doing outside turns towards the rail until you can control him. Why outside turns first? Because he's already a horse willing to be angry at me. I don't want to ask for an inside turn and have him halfway to me before I realize he's mad. I want to do the outside turns and dominate his movement. Then, after I can control his movement really well, make him put his nose, I will literally hang targets around the round pen and make him put his nose on specific ribbons or twine or whatever until I can put his nose anywhere I want it. Then I will go back and bring the inside turns about. Most of the time, that will have changed his attitude so much that the biting and striking is just naturally gone. The biting and striking is a disrespectful attitude. It's a horse who knows he's higher on the pecking order than you. You've got to change that pecking order.
So I've likened a nipping or biting horse in the past, like if you've ever raised children about 2 years old, they seem to like to bite for whatever reason. And retribution needs to come quick and swift. And if it does, you stop it, fairly quickly. Would that be an accurate statement? It needs to come pretty quick.
Absolutely. My mother bit me back. She only had to do it once. She says, I have no memory of it. I know I have no desire to bite anybody. But she told me that I was bad about biting. And she tolerated it a few times. And finally, an older woman told her, you need to bite him back. And she grabbed my little arm and bit it. And I've never desired to bite anybody since then. And that's exactly right. It needs to be quick. It needs to be sufficient. The punishment needs to be sufficient to the crime. And that horse needs to understand that was a bad mistake. Don't do that again. Do not do that again. You don't want to risk that. People say to me frequently, I don't want my horse scared of me. I love my dad. I think he's one of the greatest men that has ever walked the face of the earth. I can't say enough good about him. At 14, I was scared to death of him. He never beat me. He never abused me, but he darn sure used a paddle and whipped me. And if I needed it, I got it. And at 14, I stopped and I thought, wait a minute, will this get me a spanking? Because if it's going to get me a whipping, I'm not going to do it. That's kind of the way your horse needs to think. Right before he does it, he needs to think, wait a minute, is this a bad idea? If this is a bad idea, I don't want to do it. So you've got to do something drastic enough to make him have that emotion.
Very good. Well, Ken, I think that, you know, we've been going for just short of an hour and a half here, and we've kind of, what I feel like, gotten through the meat of our questions. And so I think I'll take this opportunity to thank you for joining us this evening. Really appreciate what you've done. I want to thank everybody for listening and joining in with us. And should you have any follow-up questions or discussions, I would encourage anyone out there to reach out to us over our website or through our Facebook page. We've had Ken, like I said, in Kirksville a couple of times, and then now virtually. And Ken, we sure would like to have you back. Hopefully, when things get a little better, we can have you back in person here in Kirksville, Missouri. And it's my hope maybe one of these days I'll get you talked into coming when it's warm weather, and maybe we can do some of these things show and tell, because I really do have followed you and really appreciate your thoughts and experiences. Again, and you know, I failed to mention this earlier, but Ken's got a show on RFD TV. I like to watch pretty often, almost religiously. So Discovering the Horseman Within, you can see Ken on RFD TV and talk about a lot of these subjects, and see it as it happens in real time. So again, I want to thank Ken for being on with us tonight. I want to thank all of our sponsors of the Missouri Livestock Symposium. Should you want to go back and listen to any of this, here, give us a couple days, and we'll post this recording on our website, again, MissouriLivestock.com, and we'll share that out there. So if you want to see bits and pieces of it and replay it, sure would invite all of you out there listening to share that with other horse enthusiasts. And Ken, until next time, man, stay safe. Sure am gonna watch you progress through your career, and love following you, man. So hopefully we'll bring you back soon.
All right, I look forward to it. Thank you so much.